In this lesson, we'll learn how to quickly add a base dirt texture to our building. Okay, so in the last lesson, we straightened out that lens distortion, and we also kind of chiseled away at a couple places on our building here. Now, at this point, thinking about adding age and wear to this building means things like dirt. So in terms of where do you start with that? In a case like this, I like to start with a photographic texture. So if you want to check your project files in the texture folder inside your images folder, you'll find this image here, and you'll find this image here. So these are a couple of good images. I like the variation in texture here. This one has a lot of really nice splotchy areas combined with some bigger splotches. This one here has some nice striations to it right in this area right here. So I'm thinking that this image right here could be used possibly for this section over here, and the other image would be used kind of for the main body of our image. So let's go ahead and jump over here and just make a new layer group, and we'll call this one something like texture. Now let's call it dirt and decay. And let's go ahead and first grab this Rust 101 and use our move tool. We'll just simply grab that and drag it up to our Lesson 5 begin file, and we'll just drop it into that file, just like so. So we've got it in just like that. Now, it's not quite big enough in its current state, so we're going to need to free transform it just a little bit. So I'll Control-T to free transform, and we'll just hold down Shift while I kind of stretch that out. So now, at this point, let's come in here and drop the layer opacity before we hit Enter. And we're just going to kind of preview how this texture is overlaying onto the image. So there's some big kind of milestone areas in this texture, and I want to be sure that we're getting those in an acceptable place. And I also want to make sure that we're getting some good texture kind of up along this upper edge. So thinking about kind of what happens to a building when water repeatedly runs over that edge, you're going to see a lot of dirt and stuff up along this edge right here. So let's go ahead and just drag that down a little bit further here. And let's go ahead and hit Enter. We'll just bring that layer opacity back up. And I'm going to actually set this over to Overlay. Now, obviously, that's pretty intense, and that's probably, in its current state, not going to work, but you can kind of see the effect that this blend mode has on this photographic texture. So now, looking at this, we can actually kind of see, well, maybe we want to go with the other edge. Maybe we want to rotate this, flip it around. So let's do that. We'll just come over here again and free transform. Grab this handle and rotate that. I'm going to hold Shift so I can snap that to increments. And we'll just kind of see what this texture looks like up top here. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and go with that for right now. But before we do, let's go ahead and let me just shrink that down just a little bit here. So we've got something that fits a little more with the building. Because what you might want to do, it may not necessarily be this texture, but maybe with other textures, you may want to come in here and warp this. So just like we did when we were fixing the lens distortion, we could come in, right-click on this before we hit Enter, and choose the warp command here. And again, we're going to get that same grid of squares here. Now, there's a lot more you can do with the warp than just grab these little intersections and move them around. You can actually grab the corners as well. So if we grab these corners and move those, you can see there's actually 2 control handles on each corner. So these handles can be dragged to kind of adjust the way the texture sits. So maybe we want to come in here and kind of pinch this texture down some, so that it conforms with kind of the curvature of the building. Pull it up from the bottom as well. Maybe something like that. So you can click really anywhere on this grid and grab basically the texture and start to just kind of push it around. Come in and drag this in just a little bit more. All right, great. So let's go ahead and hit enter to confirm this. And once we've done that, we've now kind of committed to this texture in this spot. But obviously we don't need all of it. So let's grab our eraser by hitting the E key on our keyboard. And I'm just going to come in with a hard round brush here. And let me Alt and right click and drag to increase the size of that. And I'm just going to come in here and begin to kind of erase away at some of this. Now, we're not using a mask or anything like that. This was, again, a photograph, so it's really easy to bring this back in. Just kind of get it off of that black barrier thing there. Now, in this area right here, I'm going to think about maybe kind of erasing some places away. So you can see here, like this wall right here and this wall, those kind of are slanted away from us. So the texture is going to look a little bit different there. So I definitely don't want it to line up and even carry into the texture that's around it so much. And also we don't have enough texture to cover completely this area right here. So I'm just going to come in and erase that away. Again, you can hold down Shift if you need to get a straight line there. Just kind of erasing this away in chunks. And I'm going to come in and take this wall right here out as well. As well as this one. That one has kind of a big, ugly texture blemish there anyways. You step back a few times holding Control, Alt, and Z. And let's zoom in so I can get a little better fix on that. I'm going to drop the layer opacity down just a little bit. Let's go down to around 70% for right now. And just kind of chiseling that away. Now you may be wondering, what are we going to do in these spots where I'm erasing this texture away? We've already kind of erased away a lot of this image. Well, we have a lot to work with when it comes to this image. There's still a lot of data up in here that we can borrow from if we need to add texture in these areas. So I'm going to grab my clone stamp to help us with that. Now the keyboard shortcut for that is S, and you can see it right over here. It looks like a little rubber stamp in your tool panel. And now we can just come over here. Maybe we like this texture up here. We want to sample that by holding down the Alt key, and you get this little crosshair. So we'll come up and sample that, and let's come in here and begin to sort of paint that in. Just like so. Now, it might be kind of nice to use something besides a hard round brush for this as well. So let's come in here and maybe choose one of our foliage type brushes. I like this Leaves 2 here. Let's see what that looks like. I'll just increase the size of that. There we go. And now we can get a little more of a scattered disbursement of this texture. Not quite so uniform. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is, you see right there what I just did? I sampled right there and I brought in that white line. Now, the reason for that is because I have my sample with the clone stamp set to current and below. So let's change that back to the current layer only. And we'll come back in here and just kind of take that out. I'll even grab my eraser and just kind of erase that away. Looks like we did that a little bit over here as well. So back to the clone stamp. Back to laying down this photographic texture base. Now obviously this is a pretty intense texture, so we don't want it to be quite this intense. So we can always come in and just apply this exact same brush to our eraser tool, and maybe come in and just kind of sporadically erase away at places of this texture. So one area that I don't really like this texture is kind of up here on this gray area up here. So if I want to come in here and just kind of erase that away, just touch that up some. And we'll just come in and kind of pull that texture out just like we added it. Definitely don't like it right there. Just kind of zoom out here, jump back to my clone stamp if I need to. Come in and apply some more texture. Now, one thing that I'm noticing about this particular photograph is that it's very, very red. Really too red for my liking. So let's go ahead and adjust that by using an adjustment layer. Now, we can do that over here just with this little black-white circle, or half-black, half-white circle, rather. And come up to hue saturation. So that's going to, now naturally that's going to affect everything below this layer unless we clip it to the layer below. Now we can do that simply by clicking this button right here, or by alt-clicking between the two layers, and you'll see that little arrow appears. Notice that button gets pressed over here. If I wanted to unclip it or clip it, we can just simply press that. So this is going to now affect only the layer below it because it's clipped there. So now we can come in and change the master hue, saturation, or lightness here, but I want to affect the reds only. So let's drop this down, and we'll just choose reds. I'm going to drop the saturation down on the reds here. Sort of like that. Let's come back up to master and affect the master saturation just a little bit. Now, obviously, we may want to come in here and take some of these bigger areas of the texture out. And again, all we need to do is come in and use our clone stamp to simply kind of feather those away. We've got lots of data here to sample from. Or maybe we want to bring some of these darker areas up in here along this lip. It's the beautiful thing about using this photograph in the capacity that we're currently using it, is that we can just simply move some of these kind of the landmark features of the texture around. So you can already tell that's starting to look pretty good. So I'm going to touch that up a little bit more. Feel free to spend as much time on that as you'd like. There's several areas here that I'd like to kind of cover with that texture, including this area down here. So there's, again, one other image that we haven't touched in this lesson. It's this Rust 88. And what I'll do is the exact same thing, grab my Move tool and just simply drag and drop. And you can see that I dragged and dropped it between that adjustment layer and the first texture. So we'll just reorder those. And let's unclip it by alt-clicking between. There we go. So with this texture, again setting it to overlay, you can see here it has kind of a rusty look to it. So I'm going to take this texture and use it along on this side of this particular building over here. And again, just erasing away what I don't need in that texture and controlling the intensity of it with the opacity of the layer. Again, these don't need to be super, super perfect. This is, again, just a texture base that we're adding to the building. Feel free to spend as much time on this as you want to, though, before you move on to the next lesson. And speaking of the next lesson, the next step in this process, after we've added the sort of this base texture, is to begin bringing in some of the overgrown foliage on the building itself. So we'll begin painting that in the next lesson.